the days that we have seen. Ah, Sir John, said I well?
We have heard the chimes at midnight, Master Robert Shelley.
That we have, that we have, that we have. In faith, Sir John, we have.
Today, we're exploring one of cinema's most overlooked masterpieces, a film that transforms Shakespeare into something deeply personal, universally moving, and undeniably timeless. This is Chimes at Midnight. In 1965, visionary filmmaker and actor Orson Welles brought to the screen what many consider his greatest achievement, Chimes at Midnight. Drawing from multiple Shakespearean plays, Welles crafted a deeply human story of friendship, loyalty, aging, and betrayal. At its center stands Sir John Falstaff, one of literature's most beloved characters, transformed into a tragic figure whose fate resonates long after the final frame. Often regarded by Welles himself as his greatest achievement, Chimes at Midnight takes the scattered threads of Shakespeare's plays and weaves them into the tragic story of Sir John Falstaff, a larger-than-life rogue whose wit, warmth, and humanity stand in stark contrast to the cold ambitions of kings and princesses. Yet beneath its humor and spectacle lies a heartbreaking reflection on time itself, how youth fades, how friendships fracture, and how the march toward greatness often leaves casualties in its wake. Released in 1965 after years of financial struggles and creative obstacles, Chimes at Midnight emerged from Orson Welles' lifelong fascination with Shakespeare. While many filmmakers have adapted the bard's work for the screen, Welles approached the material from a uniquely personal perspective. Rather than focusing on kings, battles, or political intrigue, he centered the story on Sir John Falstaff, a character he viewed as one of Shakespeare's greatest creations. Falstaff is a man of contradictions. He is boastful yet lovable, irresponsible yet wise, comical yet deeply tragic. Living on the fringes of society, he spends his days drinking, scheming, and reveling with Prince Hal, the young heir to the English throne. Their friendship forms the emotional core of the film, creating a bond that feels remarkably modern despite its medieval setting. What makes Chimes at Midnight so extraordinary is that it reframes Shakespeare's history plays through Falstaff's eyes. The political struggles that consume England become secondary to a far more intimate story. The story of a man who believes he has found a place in the world, only to discover that history has little room for sentiment. As Prince Hal gradually embraces his destiny and transforms into King Henry V, the carefree world he once shared with Falstaff begins to disappear. Welles understood that beneath Shakespeare's grand language lay something deeply universal. We have all experienced relationships altered by ambition, time, and circumstance. We have all watched chapters of our lives come to an end, often before we were ready to let them go. It is this emotional truth that gives Chimes at Midnight its enduring power. And nowhere is that power more evident than in Welles' portrayal of Falstaff himself, a performance filled with humor, vulnerability, and profound humanity. Rather than presenting himself as a mere comic side character, Welles transforms Falstaff into the very soul of the film, a symbol of joy, friendship, and a disappearing way of life.
That we have, that we have, that we have. In faith, Sir John, we have.
When he betrays Falstaff is just like what Orson did to his father by cutting him off. Welles is very focused on Hal as a kind of villainous character, but he has great sympathy for him because I think he sees himself in Hal rejecting Falstaff being the father. But it's very complex because he identifies totally with Falstaff as well. I mean, he's so much invested in Falstaff emotionally. And they used aluminum dust. They would throw it in the air right before the shot, and Richard said it lasted for about 30 seconds, but it gave an extraordinary effect.
Falstaff, kind.
He said Welles wanted the faces of the people to stand out. He always wanted the faces to be well lit. And Richard thought that was a vestige of Welles's theatrical roots.
Among the film's many achievements, none is more celebrated than the Battle of Shrewsbury. Lasting only a few minutes on screen, this sequence has become one of the most influential battle scenes in cinematic history. Working with limited resources and a relatively small number of extras, Welles accomplished what many larger productions could not. He captured the brutal chaos and visceral reality of medieval warfare. Gone is the romanticized heroism often associated with historical epics. Instead, the battle unfolds as a violent storm of mud, steel, sweat, and confusion. Through rapid editing, dynamic camera angles, and striking sound design, Welles places the audience directly within the carnage. The clash of swords, the thunder of armored bodies colliding, and the relentless pace of the sequence create an overwhelming sense of immersion that feels remarkably modern, even by today's standards. Its influence can be seen in countless films that followed. From medieval epics to modern war dramas, directors have long admired the sequence for its raw authenticity and innovative filmmaking techniques, recognizing it as a landmark moment that helped redefine how combat could be portrayed on the screen. Decades later, the Battle of Shrewsbury remains a masterclass in visual storytelling and cinematic craftsmanship.
As usual, Wells started editing the moment he started filming. In the middle of a park, in the middle of Madrid. For once, Wells actually didn't rely on the impulse of the moment. He absolutely had it all planned out, exactly what he needed for this sequence to make it work. With an understudy, a stand-in, as Falstaff in battle gear, in his full armor, weaving his way through the scenes. And it turned out that the day they were going to shoot, the first day they were going to shoot, it started to rain and it cascaded down. But Wells was delighted by this because it meant that the set was full of mud, and he even got the local fire brigade in to put in more water so that it would become even messier and muddier. He knew that there was so little time for the shooting of this that I think they had the army for 2 days, and then they had the extras for another day, and then they had to get out of the park. That was as much time as they had, and everything was so slippy. And Edmond Richard, the director of photography, slipped and fell and concussed himself and was swept off to hospital. Wells picked up his camera and carried on filming. It was that kind of a levels of adrenaline, which is what Wells adored. Wells absolutely flourished on and demanded and required adrenaline to be able to do what he did. And he had it in spades on this film.
Yet, for all its technical brilliance, Chimes at Midnight is remembered not for its battles, but for its humanity. Beneath the armor, the crowns, and the political intrigue lies a deeply moving story about friendship, loyalty, and the passage of time. It is a film that reminds us that history is not only shaped by kings and warriors, but also by the relationships that define our lives.
Rebellion in this land shall lose its sway, meeting the check of such another day.
You are going with Prince John of Lancaster against Northumberland.
There's not a dangerous action could keep out his head, but I'm thrust upon it. Well, I cannot last ever. But it was always the trick of our English nation is to have a good thing to make it too common.
Well, Falstaff, the king hath severed you and Prince Harry.
Yes, I thank you're pretty wet for it.
People often ask me what it was like being directed by Wells. I can't think of any specific direction, acting direction that he gave me, or that he gave anybody.
In that scene, he could have stood behind the camera and I would have been made up, and then he'd dress up for his return. But he dressed up for my scene and knelt in front of the camera, and it made it extraordinary. I mean, he loves long, low shots, so that the king's image is shot from below, and then the reverse. I find the look on Orson's face, Falstaff's face, when I reject him, I find that close-up of him incredibly moving, because he's hurt, cruelly hurt, but at the same time, he looks at me with a sort of pride. That's my boy. He's come into being the king. And there are many touches like that. I don't think any of us thought it was going to be as moving. We didn't think either that it was going to be such terrific fun. It was really wonderful fun.
The principle I would teach them would be this: to forswear in quotations and to addict themselves to sack.
The story behind Chimes at Midnight is nearly as remarkable as the film itself. By the time production began, Orson Welles had spent years struggling to secure financing for his project. Much like Falstaff, the character he so passionately championed, Welles often found himself working on the fringes of the establishment. Admired for his genius, yet frequently denied the resources afforded to other filmmakers. The film was assembled from several Shakespearean sources, primarily Henry IV, Part 1 and 2, but also drawing material from Richard II, Henry V, and the Merry Wives of Windsor. Rather than presenting a traditional adaptation, Welles crafted something entirely unique, a Shakespearean epic viewed through the eyes of Falstaff, transforming a supporting character into the emotional center of the story. Budget constraints plagued the production from beginning to end. Welles was forced to improvise constantly, often shooting scenes out of sequence and making creative decisions based on whatever locations, costumes, and funding happened to be available at the time. Yet these limitations ultimately became strengths. His ingenuity allowed him to create a film that feels far grander than its modest budget would suggest. Ironically, although Welles considered Chimes at Midnight to be his finest work, the film remained difficult to see for many years due to complex rights issues and distribution problems. As a result, generations of moviegoers were largely unaware of its existence. Only in recent decades has the film received the recognition it deserves, with many critics and filmmakers now ranking it among the greatest Shakespeare adaptations ever committed to film. In many ways, the fate of Chimes at Midnight mirrors the fate of Falstaff himself, a misunderstood masterpiece that spent years in the shadows before finally receiving its rightful place in history.
The film that you're working on now, what is the title? Who is in it? What is it about?
Well, this thing you see me working on that we're just finishing will be opening in America early in the winter, maybe late fall, is called Chimes at Midnight. And it's really the life and death of Falstaff. I play Falstaff, and Jean Moreau is Dal Tersheet. Sir John Gielgud is the king. Ralph Richardson is the narrator. And Walter Chiari, who was in New York a couple of years ago in a musical, is in it. Marina Vladi. Margaret Rutherford, who's pretty well known in America now, is a marvelous character. Well, she plays Mistress Quickly. And it's made of the Falstaff plays, but it's really his life story. And we've shot it entirely here in Spain in the old castles and in the countryside here. It's a very big picture. Hope it's a good one. I mean, it's certainly big. We've been struggling along with just, you find me in the last 3 or 4 days. We're running to Paris tomorrow, and we do the last mixing, and then it goes to the festival in Venice. That's it. It's a story of a friendship, betrayal of a friendship, really. Falstaff is this extraordinary man, I think one of the most interesting figures in all dramatic literature, and his friendship with the young prince, and the prince's father, who was a kind of guilty Puritan. It's the triangle between the real father and the father of the boy's choice. And the story of the betrayal of this friendship between Falstaff and the prince when the prince becomes the king and has to renounce him and give up all of his bum friends in order to be Henry V. And that's the climax of the picture. But the big action sequence is what you find me working on now, which is the battle. That's what we've got here. This is the battle scene. It's quite a long sequence, almost a reel. It's the battle between the forces of Hotspur and Prince Hal, a great civil war that tore England apart, and which is the center of the story. This was all shot in the country here in Spain. The armor was our biggest problem because it had to be made specially out of plastic in Italy. I don't know how the fellows who wore armor in the old days rode and fought in it, because no living soul can now. We're not the men that our ancestors were, so it's all plastic.